the most dangerous island on Earth. The Indian Ocean hides many secrets under its waves: beautiful islands, sunken cities, shipwrecks, hidden caves. But one island stands out above all others, because it is home to some of the most dangerous inhabitants on Earth. It's forbidden to approach this island. Even helicopters are not allowed to fly over it, and any ships that come too close will be attacked by the locals. This is North Sentinel Island, and this is the story of the man who got too close. Our hero is John Allen Shaw, an ordinary man who went on an extraordinary journey to the most dangerous island on Earth. John was born on December 18, 1963. His father was a pastor, and John inherited his father's passion for Christianity. In general, John grew up to be an ordinary guy. He had 2 brothers and 5 sisters, and he worked as a ship's cook, although he didn't make enough money to support himself. So John also drove a taxi and fished to make ends meet. Despite this, he always dreamed of traveling to distant and exotic places, and even bought a boat so he could go exploring. However, John never managed to go on the trip of his dreams. He simply didn't have enough money. John's big chance came when he met 2 businessmen, Lars and Charlie. They were looking for someone to accompany them on a trip to the Andaman Islands in India, and John was just the man they were looking for. The catch was they didn't plan to return from this trip. According to the plan, Lars and Charlie would sail to North Sentinel Island and then go to a heavenly place called the Gates of the Sea. After that, they would find uninhabited islands and stay there forever. John was delighted with the offer. He accepted it without hesitation. There were other members of the expedition, 2 Englishmen, Steve and Mike, and a Swede named Peter. All of them met in Port Blair, the capital of the Andaman Islands. The team stayed there for a few days, getting ready for the journey. Meanwhile, they told each other stories about how great the journey would be, and how they would live like Robinson Crusoe on the deserted islands. However, little did they know that North Sentinel Island was no ordinary island. No one was supposed to set foot there. The locals were extremely aggressive, and there were rumors that they ate people. But the travelers dismissed these rumors. But the journey itself was very difficult. There were storms and strong waves. But finally, on January 22, 2006, the ship approached the most dangerous island in the world. The travelers hid the ship in the thickets of trees and went ashore. To their surprise, there was no one on the beach. Maybe the rumors were true and the islanders had seen them and were now hiding in the forest. But then they would have definitely left the island. John and the rest of the travelers thought otherwise. They believed that the islanders were hiding somewhere nearby, watching them, waiting for the right moment to attack. After staying on the island for several hours, the travelers decided to leave. But the next morning they were horrified to discover that their ship was destroyed. The mast was broken and the sails were torn. It was clear that no one had done this but the islanders. But where were they? Why did they destroy the ship if they didn't want to talk to the travelers? The explorers were shocked. They had no way of getting off the island now, and they started looking for food. When the hunters returned, John decided to try communicating with the locals. He sang Christian worship songs in the hope that they would understand him and maybe even help. The islanders did emerge from the forest to see what was going on, but they didn't understand John's words and even got scared of the white-skinned strangers. However, John didn't give up. He wanted to baptize the natives and convert them to Christianity, but for that he needed to get closer to them. John and the other explorers tried to make friends with the locals by offering them fish. The Sentinelese took the fish, but they kept their distance and soon disappeared into the forest again. From the first days on the island, the explorers began to notice that the islanders were divided into 2 groups, men and women. The men were tall and muscular, well adapted to the harsh conditions of the island. The women were petite, which may be due to the fact that they had no contact with outsiders and didn't know anything about proper nutrition. The men wore necklaces made of bones and feathers, and the women decorated themselves with paint. They lived in huts made of leaves and tree branches, and their weapons were bows and arrows. A week after the explorers arrived, a small girl came up to John and shot an arrow at him. Fortunately, the arrow didn't hit him, but it was still a warning. The explorer understood that they weren't welcome on the island, and that the Sentinelese considered them outsiders. However, John wasn't going to give up. One day he decided to build a cross and once again began singing Christian worship songs. The local tribesmen watched from afar as John built the cross, and when he finished, they surrounded him. The man continued singing, and one of the tribesmen picked up a spear lying nearby and threw it away. Apparently he liked the song and he approved of what John was doing. Otherwise, why else would he have picked up a weapon and thrown it? Maybe he wanted to scare John, or maybe he wanted to kill him. But the fact that the man didn't attack immediately gave John hope that he could win over the local residents and make them listen to his words. However, that night, the explorers heard sounds that made their blood run cold. It was a war dance. The men beat drums and rattled bones, and the travelers huddled together in their shelter, afraid to make a sound. When the sun rose, they saw a drawing of a man hanging from a tree. Judging by the signs, the drawing was made by the Sentinelese, and judging by its location, they considered the person depicted to be prey. This meant only one thing. The islanders were preparing for a hunt. They were waiting for the right moment to attack. The explorers knew that they had to get off the island as soon as possible. If the Sentinelese decided to attack, there would be nowhere to hide. But the question was, how could they do that without a ship? Suddenly, one of the explorers remembered that there was a military base not far from the island. Surely the soldiers would be able to help them. However, the military wouldn't just let them off the island. They would take the explorers to the capital and then throw them in jail for breaking the law. While the explorers were thinking of a way out, one of the locals came up to them and said something. It was obvious that he wanted something in return for the information. The explorers gave him fish, and the man pointed them in the direction they needed to go. Thanking him, the travelers set off along the coast, all of them except for John. He wanted to stay on the island a little longer, hoping to convert the local population to Christianity, but his friends were against it and forced John to leave. It's worth noting that not all members of the expedition left the island. Some stayed there voluntarily, while others were captured by the travelers moved through the jungle all day, and when the sun began to set, they heard the familiar sounds of drums. The Sentinelese were hunting, and they were most likely looking for the explorers. John and the others ran as fast as they could, hiding in the bushes. Occasionally, they could hear the shouts of the tribesmen behind them, urging them to hurry up. When the explorers finally reached the clearing, they collapsed on the ground, exhausted. Then they noticed a military camp in the distance. The men quickly got up and ran towards the soldiers. Of course, they were detained and taken to the capital, but at least they were safe. As for John, he returned to the island to look for the guys who had stayed there. However, no one was there anymore. It seemed that the Sentinelese had captured them and were now holding them hostage. To free his friends, John decided to wage war against the islanders. He returned to the United States and joined the Marines. After training, the former cook returned to the island to rescue his friends, but he never did. A year later, the whole world learned about John's crazy adventure. He became a kind of local celebrity, and he used his fame to travel around the country talking about his journey to North Sentinel Island and his faith in God. In his speeches, John said that he was unafraid of the Sentinelese, and that he would be happy to return to the island if given the chance. The man kept his word. In 2014, John Allen Char disappeared without a trace on his way to North Sentinel Island. Most likely he was captured by the locals. The police conducted a search operation, but didn't find either John or the ship that took him to the island. It's believed that the man is still alive and is held hostage on North Sentinel Island.